Well, it is now official. The House of Representatives have passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, meaning more relief is coming to millions of Americans. Today we're going to break this down, what this means for so many people, who's better off, and who is actually going to be the loser of this One Big Beautiful Bill. We'll address this in just a moment, but first, before I do, if you enjoy these daily updates, go ahead, hit that like button, and now let's begin. Look at this right here. It says House narrowly passes Trump's mega bill in major victory for Republicans. Keep in mind, the Senate has already passed this bill. It was just coming back to the House for their stamp on it before it gets sent to President Trump's desk for a signature. The goal for the past 6 months was to get this passed and make sure it passes before the 4th of July, which is tomorrow. Obviously, they achieved their goal. So, what does this mean? Well, it says the House passed President Donald Trump's massive tax and spending bill. And it is. It's a massive bill. Over 1,000 pages long. It says Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries broke records with a nearly 9-hour speech decrying the bill on the chamber floor before the final vote. Keep in mind, many Republicans said this bill was going to pass by midnight last night. However, it took until today. They expected it was going to pass on July 2nd. Well, it took until July 3rd to actually get this passed. I want to show you something though. It says the legislation stalled overnight as a handful of holdouts demanded concessions from the White House before they agreed to move the bill forward. House Speaker Mike Johnson spent all night trying to unify his conference, which finally he officially did. Now, this bill, it passed with a final vote, 218 to 214. The only two Republicans that voted against it was Thomas Massie and Brian Fitzpatrick. They voted against it alongside all the chamber's Democrats, which we knew that was going to happen. Now, who's the winner? Well, I want to show you this. This is an article from CNN. I want to show you what it says, okay? Look at this right here. It says, here's who stands to gain from the big, beautiful bill and who may struggle. Now, we kind of know what's in the bill, right? We've talked about it before, but who's going to gain the most from it? Well, this is who CNN is saying is better off. It says corporate America is better off. It says big business groups, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Business Roundtable, applauded the Senate's passage of the bill on Tuesday. It says corporations are betting they will benefit from the legislation, making permanent the tax breaks in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So yes, businesses are definitely the winners in this instance. Another one, manufacturers. It says manufacturers are especially happy that the bill would make significant changes to how the U.S. tax code treats the construction of new manufacturing facilities. It says if the bill passes, which it did, businesses would be allowed to fully and immediately deduct the cost of building new manufacturing facilities. The temporary provision is retroactive to January 19th, 2025, and continues for construction that begins before January 1st, 2029. Again, manufacturers are applauding this as well. Here's a big one. Small businesses and partnerships. It says the National Federation of Independent Business, the leading small business lobbying group, praised the legislation for making permanent a special deduction for the owners of certain pass-through entities who pay businesses taxes on their individual tax returns. That deduction, which applies to small businesses and partnerships formed by lawyers, doctors, and investors, would get increased in the House version of the bill from 20% to 23%. The Senate kept it at 20%. Okay. Here's another winner. High income earners. It says the net income for the top 20% of earners would increase by nearly $13,000 per year after taxes and transfers. It says that amounts to 3% of the average increase in income for those households. For the top 1% of earners, the average annual income gain would amount to more than $290,000. Goes on to say Americans living in high tax states would also benefit from this, from the Senate version of the legislation, because it temporarily increases the SALT tax deduction, or the state and local taxes, for households making up to $500,000 annually to $40,000 per year for 5 years, as opposed to the $10,000 that they're getting before. The next winner, workers who receive tips and overtime. And we knew this was coming. Says employees who work in jobs that traditionally receive tips could deduct up to $25,000 in tip income from their federal income taxes, while workers who receive overtime could deduct up to $12,500 of that extra pay. However, highly compensated individuals who make more than $160,000 in 2025 would not qualify. That's the good news there, is high income earners are not going to benefit off of tips and overtime pay. Okay. Now, who is going to be worse off? This is the big question. Now, some say that this isn't making people worse off, because it's still better than what it would be if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was not extended. But this is what CNN is saying. It says, here's who's worse off: low-income Americans. It says right here, many people at the lowest end of the income ladder would be worse off because the package would enact historic cuts to the nation's safety net program, particularly Medicaid and food stamps. Those are the two programs that are getting hit. Okay? Now, keep this in mind. Food stamps is not technically getting hit. Well, it is in a way if you're not working, right? Things like that. Medicaid is going to receive this big hit, where they're saying between 11 and 17 million people could lose health coverage, which means if those people want to go to the doctor, want to go to the hospital or clinic for whatever reason, they're going to have to pay out of pocket, which could be very expensive depending on the situation and the reason why they're going in. But for food stamps, what we're going to see is the federal government wants to pretty much pull themselves away from food stamps slowly and put the responsibility on the states. That's kind of what's happening at this time. Goes on to say, these in the lowest income group earning less than $18,000 a year would see a $165 reduction in their after-tax, after-transfer income once the safety net cuts are taken into account, according to Penn Wharton. That's a 1.1% decrease. The next level, who earn between $18,000 and $53,000, would get a $30 bump in income, or 0.1%. Middle-income households would see their income rise by $1,430, or 1.8%. And they earn between $53,000 and $96,000. So again, the lowest income households are going to feel the pain here, simply because of the reductions in Medicaid and SNAP. If you don't receive any of those and you're still low income, then again, this doesn't really apply. The next one is hospitals. It says right here, real-life consequences of these nearly $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts, the largest ever proposed by Congress, will result in irreparable harm to healthcare system, reducing access to care for all Americans, and severely undermining the ability of hospitals and health systems to care for our most vulnerable patients. And yeah, hospitals are going to feel the impact. However, in order to help this and not completely hurt hospitals, says the association said it is deeply disappointed with the bill, even though it contains a $50 billion fund to help rural hospitals contend with the Medicaid cuts. So yes, there's going to be cuts about $1 trillion over 10 years, but they have included $50 billion in a fund to help with those coming cuts. The next one is clean energy and EVs. They're getting rid of some of the credits. You can see it right here. Electric vehicle makers could also be left worse off because the GOP bill ends EV tax credits of up to $7,500 at the end of September. And then the ones that are really hurting the American people are deficit hawks. It says the Senate version of the package would increase the deficit by about $3.4 trillion over the next decade. Adding trillions to the debt risks lifting already elevated interest rates. That in turn will make it more expensive for Americans to finance the purchase of a car or a home, and for businesses to borrow money to grow. So essentially what businesses are getting in the short term could actually come back to bite them in the long term all because our deficit is growing out of control. So we're going to see what happens, how this plays out. But just understand right now, this was the first big bill. This was the first one. According to reports, President Trump has other bills in the works or that he's planning on, but this one had to go through first. As this one goes through and it starts making its way through the economy, then the next bill will come and potentially provide even more relief. So that's what we know as of today, but again, we'll see what happens in the very near future. If you are happy that this bill passed, go ahead, hit that like button. If you are a little bit unsure and questioning whether this was the right timing for this bill, let me know the reasoning down in the comment section below. But again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.